I've been a pediatric endocrinologist for about 30 years. It's a specialty of hormones and hormone problems in children. And the reason that I am particularly concerned in regard to transgender issues in children is that we are treating children specifically and with hormones that are foreign to their bodies and which do damage to their bodies and which create sterility and then consider sexual mutilation surgeries by removing of breasts in the girls or taking off penis and scrotum in boys. And this is being recommended and done in kids that aren't at the age of consent. Okay, so the adolescent brain does not really mature until the early 20s. And there's plenty of scientific study to show that you can't make decisions that require that degree of sophistication in most cases. And we're allowing kids who are 13 or 14 to consent to surgeries in the state of Oregon without parental consent. And so these are children who are going to be surgically mutilated, who will be sterilized, and you can't put those pieces back. Once the breasts are cut off, you could possibly have some reconstructive surgery that would make a structure that might look like your breast, but it would never lactate, it would never have the function it was designed to do. So there's harm done to these children. You're medicalizing something that is really a problem within their sort of psychosocial concept of themselves. So the therapies that we know work are the counseling therapies, the really in-depth, supportive, compassionate things that have helped these children. We know that if you do that the vast majority of them, 80–90% of boys and girls, will come back to believe they're born in the right body instead of the wrong body. The small percentage of those who go on to adulthood have to deal with this problem for the balance of their life, and they may choose and consent to medical treatments and surgical treatments that will affect them adversely, but they weigh and measure as adults. I think it's worth the possibility of some harm to myself if there's any possible benefit, because they're so psychologically miserable. And the misery, as it turns out, is painted over as societal rejection, when in truth there's nothing. There is some societal rejection, clearly, but the majority of it is the internal rejection of themselves, anxiety, depression, and they use the concept of being born into the wrong body as to trying to find a solution to their deep-seated emotional problems. I suggested to the Texas Medical Board that they take a lead in being a group that would recommend that transgender clinics as they now exist in Texas would pause what they're doing and have a thorough evaluation by a broad spectrum team of people with opinions on both sides of the issue to critically review the literature and come up with some guidelines that are appropriate for kids. We're seeing incredibly large numbers of kids across our country. There are now 50+ transgender clinics across the country in the United States that have grown from a single clinic in 2006. 13 years time, all of a sudden everything is mushroomed, and these transgender kids are coming out of the woodwork. The people who treat these kids in those clinics say it's just because it's now acceptable, and it's absolute nonsense, because these kids, if they were there before, would have all, by the statistics that they quote, they would have all killed themselves, because before they desisted with the help of counseling when they didn't get a chance to have surgeries or medical treatments, and they're using the fear of suicide attempt or completion as a reason to go ahead and allow these transitions to occur medically and surgically. Well, if that's the case, then we must have had a drop in suicide rate in the transgender population, because before, when they were not allowed to have the medical and surgical treatments, they didn't kill themselves. Now that they're allowed to, they threaten they're going to kill themselves. And as a matter of fact, online, if you Google the transgender advice sites, the first thing that they tell these kids is, be sure you tell your doctor you're going to kill yourself, so that you can get your letter that you can take to your trans clinic, and they can give you your hormones. It's called the letter. They call it the letter. It's important to get the letter. And that comes from a physician, a pediatrician, family practice doc, a nurse practitioner, a PA, that listens to the child who says, I'm born in the wrong body. And the kid says, I'm going to kill myself if you don't let me have my hormones and surgery. And that passes them right along by. So the inflation, when you ask these kids as a group, which has been done and published in the journal Pediatrics last October, surprisingly, 51% of these kids said, oh yeah, I've tried to kill myself at least once. And the answer is, no, they were coached into saying that. So, I mean, the number of using suicide fear, it's like, if a child says to you, Mom, I want a BMW. I'm 16, I have one, a driver's license. Everybody at my school has one. And the parent says, not only no, but you know what? No, it's not going to happen. I'm going to kill myself then. Well, gosh. That must mean that child needs a BMW. You either have a kid without a BMW who's dead or a kid with a BMW who's alive. Which would you do as a parent? I mean, it's nonsense. If you look at that logic that says threat of suicide is enough to push these kids through affirmation, we're being duped. We're being duped, and it's tragic because the outcomes of medical and surgical treatment are vastly, profoundly devastating to these children.
You heard the representative of the Texas Medical Association also testify today during public comment. Had you had another chance to respond to that testimony, what would you have told to tell?
Well, first of all, I would have thanked her for being there, because we do want to listen to each other. Okay, I would have asked her, did she want me to sit down with her and go over point by point? She made some quotes about the suicide rate, and I would love to have shared with her the real literature and instead of just accepting blindly the statements that she made. She made statements that are essentially a cookie cutter of the WPATH guidelines. And that's how WPATH works, is they stamp out standards of care, which they've been doing for 20 or 30 years, and they hand those around, and backing up those standards of care are literature quotes, which are absolutely unfounded when you actually pull the literature and you take the time. And it's time consuming to go through a paper that has 120 references and take each one of them, read them thoroughly, and say whether or not the paper actually said what they're quoting it said. But when people have done that and taken the time to do that, and as a busy practicing endocrinologist in private practice, I don't have time to do that. But I recognize the red flag references that have been pointed out. You find out that what they're stating is truth is not truth at all. Okay, and I would have had an opportunity not to embarrass this woman who meant very well. Okay, her point was compassion. Don't judge people who are suffering. Reach out to them and get them. If we marginalize these kids, they're going to go off and hurt themselves. Okay, but counseling therapy, compassionate counseling therapy, is not marginalization. It is the most compassionate thing you can do for these kids. Band-aiding them over with social affirmation and telling everybody else in the room, don't make fun of this child. Don't make fun of this boy who's now wearing a dress. Don't make fun of this girl who is, cut her hair off and is wearing boys' clothing and is growing a beard. Okay, don't make fun of that child. Okay, understand that they're suffering and support them, be their friend, love them, care for them. Same thing to tell the parents. But don't go the direction of harm, which is cross-sex hormones and surgery. Don't do that. Okay, because that's harmful. We know it is. People, use your brains, be fair-minded, listen to both sides. Don't immediately put somebody in the trash basket and label them as transphobic and a hater because they don't believe this new sort of social contagion. Instead, sit down with these people, listen to them, give them a chance, give them a voice. Perhaps recommend to your own pediatrician, hey, I heard this on the news. We need to start something in Texas. Can we get a group together? Would you be willing to invite somebody to come in and speak at your pediatric meetings locally? Those are things that parents can do. And I think we're now going to have a crop of kids in their 20s and 30s who sort of did their transition abruptly in their teen years after not having any symptoms whatsoever, abruptly coming at age 15 and 16 saying, I'm in the wrong body, I want my breast cut off. And that's essentially what's happening exponentially at this point in time. Those girls who have done that are now coming back saying, oh my God, what did I do? And they're the people that we need to recruit. It's going to be hard because how would you feel if you did that to yourself because you were angry about something, or your family was falling apart, or your dad beat you, or your boyfriend gave something happened that made you want to just lash out and do something that is a payback. That is, I don't know what, I'm mad at everybody, and this looks like a good thing that'll solve my problems. Okay, and that's starting to happen. So we're going to have people coming back from that side. The adults who've lived through this for 20 and 30 and 40 years and come back are now coming out of the woodwork and starting to publish stories and write books and do online blogs and to say, don't go this direction. I swore on a stack of Bibles as an adult. I made this decision myself. Traveled across the country to have a surgeon mutilate my body, and I lived that way, and I was convinced it was the right thing, and I was convinced, and and then all of a sudden I realized I didn't want to live anymore. And I went to took myself to a therapist, and we really got to the issues, and I realized, oh my God, it's been there all along since I was a child. And all the thoughts I had that made me want to go ahead and, as an adult, and transform myself physically and look like the opposite sex were all a cover over of the undercurrent problem. And now that I realize that, I'm coming back. And in Walt Heyer's case, he's been married for 20 years. He had jettisoned his original family. He has a new wife who's his advocate, and they go around the country and the world talking about it, so that they say, come see us first, listen to us first. It's not what you think it's going to be. So.